Today, we have a speaker by the name of Len Joy, and we've had Len before. He's an author, talked about his other books in the past. He happens to also be a triathlete, and he was a member of the Team USA. And he gave us a talk about that one time as well, a couple of years ago, about preparing triathlete. Anyway, today he's going to be talking about Dry Heat, his latest novel. It's a crime novel. Len grew up in the Finger Lakes area of New York State. Len, you'll correct me on this.
Yeah.
I believe first book came out in 2014, and it was one of them. America's pastime, better days. Everyone dies famous in a small town, and then this one, Dry Heat. So he's going to be talking about this novel and other books. And Len has been very good in the past. I'm sure he will today. So without further ado, Len, welcome.
I'm interrupting a second. I've turned the lights off so you can see the screen. Does anybody want some lights on in the back or anything? A little in the back? I'll see what I can do.
Should I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Jay. It's really great to be back here again. According to Google Maps, I was here 3 years ago, but I know I had one in between that. This is the fourth time I've had the opportunity to speak to the North Shore Senior Center. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. No mic. Earlier this month, as you can see from the slide, that my fourth book, Dry Heat, was published. Now, before I talk about the story and a little of my background, I want to show you a book trailer that gives you an idea what the story is about. Okay. Now, Jay told you that I grew up in upstate New York. I want to share a few more details about that. I actually grew up in Canandaigua, New York, and it's the Finger Lakes region. As you can see, it's beautiful country. It was like an ideal place for a kid to grow up. We had amusement parks, we had a lake, high school dances, little league. I don't want to wax too nostalgic about it, but for a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s, this was a really good gig. And one of the advantages of being in a small community is there's a lot less competition. I was able to compete and play on the high school football, basketball, and baseball teams. I know I've never been able to do something like that in a town like Evanston where my kids grew up. Now, being a big fish in a small town has a lot of advantages. You get to be, you get to grow in your confidence and your self-esteem. There is a downside though, because eventually you have to go out into the real world. I went to the University of Rochester. And I had dual fantasies growing up in that small town. You know, I wanted to be a professional football player and a world famous writer. I wasn't offered any football scholarships, and I made the football team. I was second string, and it was clear that I was somewhat delusional in that fantasy. But I held on to that writing fantasy. I think more than anything, I appreciated I imagined what the world famous writer lifestyle was like more than I had any burning conviction to share my stories with the world. So I became an English major because I felt that was the proper course of action for someone who wants to be an aspiring novelist. In the spring of my first year of school, my paper by Thoreau was crushed by my American Lit professor. I mean, it was shredded, and I was crushed. I decided that my fantasy of writing was every bit as delusional as my professional sport fantasy. And back then, they didn't have ratings systems for teachers. But last week, on a whim, I Googled this professor who had ripped my paper so badly. And I found this rating system. He's long gone. I think he's gone. But his ratings endure forever. And a couple of the nice quotes. Professor X is a petty, mean-spirited, and truly awful person. Avoid any classes he teaches at all costs. Don't take his classes if you're sensitive. Well, I was sensitive. You know, if I had read those evaluations, I probably wouldn't have taken his class. But I wasn't ready to be a writer. My change in career path was a good thing for me. 2 months after the term paper incident, at the first nice day of spring. I was just sitting on the quad, minding my own business, when a pretty girl threw a Frisbee across the quad, called my name. While I didn't make it as a wide receiver, I was able to catch that Frisbee, and I was clever enough to throw it back. And hopefully this works. Yes, 4 years later, we were married. And by 1989, we had 3 children. We were married in 1973. And I went on, got my business degree instead of my writing degree. And we moved to Chicago. And my wife went to law school at the University of Chicago. And I went to work as the United States Gypsum Company as a market analyst. I worked there for 13 years, moving slowly up the ladder, too slowly, in my opinion. You know, I wanted to own my own company. I wanted to be my own boss. I attempted to buy a division of USG, but they didn't think I was worthy. So I left USG, and a year later, I bought an engine remanufacturing company in Phoenix. And for the next 15 years, I ran that company with my brother-in-law. We had over 200 employees, most of whom were recent arrivals from Mexico. In 1990, we were audited by the INS, and they revealed to us that we had over 100 illegal immigrants. That was a devastating revelation, and it could have crushed the company. It could have put us out of business, but the INS worked with us, and they gave us time to fix the job. And I've always been very grateful for the decency that they showed us. In the summer of 1996, a young man showed up at the front desk and asked to see his ex-girlfriend. She was a piston installer working for us. She went out at her break into the parking lot, and he shot and killed her. Then he shot himself superficially. There were over 100 of the employees with her at her funeral. That business was a challenge. We sold national accounts like AutoZone and Napa, and they're great for volume, but they're extremely hard to deal with. They can make your life miserable. And of course, we were always getting help from the government, the INS, the EPA, Department of Labor. We had to constantly chase our customers for payment so we could pay our employees and suppliers. And I commuted to work unusually, 10 days in Phoenix, 10 days in Evanston. I accumulated over 1 million air miles. I did love the challenge of running that business. And that boy who had been an English professor, crushed by that English professor, had grown a lot more resilient over the years. But there were weeks when I was really looked forward to that ride home. 3 hours with no demands. On one flight, after a couple of Chardonnays, I wrote a poem about the experience. The plane lifts off, turns east towards the sun, shoes off, seat back, 3 hours of freedom, a glass of wine and a window seat. It's always sunny at 30,000 feet. The world below is small and clean and neat. We closed the business in 2003. And after that, I received a flyer. Shortly after that, I received a flyer from the University of Chicago's Graham School advertising their course in creative writing. I signed up for the intro course, and my instructor, Barb Croft, was encouraging, not like quit your day job encouraging, but she suggested I enjoy taking a summer writing course. I might enjoy it at the Iowa Writers Festival. I enrolled in the one-week course called Introduction to Fiction, which was taught by Sands Hall, a former actress and a best-selling New York Times author of the book Catching Heaven. She's also the daughter of Oakley Hall, who's an esteemed writing instructor and novelist. Each day she gave us homework. One of the assignments toward the end of the week was to write a 200-word short story. This is the era before tweets and Twitter. And the general reaction from the class was, that's impossible, can't be done. It was a great exercise for me because you had to work on every word. Every word was critical. You couldn't just throw in any extra words. And here's my story. It's the first sort of published story I had. Game. Jake pulled his midnight blue 97 Camaro convertible into the handicap zone at Kedzie and Clybourne, his spot. He grabbed his bag from the back seat and headed across Kedzie to the courts. The early morning sun was in his eyes and his head was pounding, so he didn't see the northbound 151 until the bus driver horn blasted him. Jake quick stepped to the other side while giving the driver the finger. 3 black kids were shooting at the west basket, the one with the net. Jake watched them as he laced up his Nikes. Maurice spotted him and nodded. Net in hand, he walked to the east basket. He rubbed his aching knee, flexed, and then leaped for the curved backboard stanchion. His fingers slipped off the pole. Again, this time he held on. Reaching around the fan backboard, he hung the nylon on the rusty rim brackets. He dribbled out to the three-point arc, turned, squared himself, and jumped. At the top of his jump, he released the ball. It rolled off his fingers with perfect rotation and ripped through the cords. His head was feeling better. At the end of the week, each student was given a one-on-one session with Sands. Believe it or not, I kept my notes from that meeting. I thought I needed to be more writerly, improve my vocabulary, learn how to use metaphors, become more lyrical. Sands told me I had a good voice. She suggested I check out Raymond Carver, who wrote very sparely. She assured me that I had a lot to learn, but she was encouraging. She told me my style was okay. Don't try to become a different writer, try to become a better writer. Her advice, keep writing, keep reading, keep going to workshops, and review other people's work, honestly, but with compassion and consideration. Over the next 10 years, I attended workshops every year, Zoetrope, Squaw Valley Tin House, the whole list, everything that was available. And writing workshops were like summer camp for adults. It was a great way to meet other aspiring writers. And many of the people I met there, I'm still in contact with today. I joined the Zoetrope online writers community, and I submitted over 60 stories in the next 12 years and reviewed over 300 pieces. In September 2006, I submitted a story that I called Dancer Stonemason is Missing. That story introduced the characters and setting that eventually became my first novel, American Pastime, which was published 8 years later. American Pastime was published in 2014 as a story of Dancer Stonemason, a promising young pitcher for the minor league team, the Rolla Rebels. He's 3 days away from being called up to pitch for the St. Louis Cardinals. his boyhood dream will be realized. He pitches a perfect game in that last minor league effort, but he damages his arm and he misses his opportunity. His life unravels. Told against the backdrop of America's post-war challenges from Little Rock to the Bay of Pigs to Vietnam, American Pastime is a story of what happens to a man and his family after the cheering stops. That theme of achieving fame or not achieving fame or glory is common to all my novels. My second novel, Better Days, was published in 2018. It's the story of Darwin Burr, who, like Dancer, was a star athlete. Darwin led his small town high school basketball team to an improbable state championship. And Darwin has coasted on that fame for 20 years. He works for his boyhood friend on a cushy job, and he has no ambition to do more, much to the chagrin of his ambitious Latvian emigre wife. But when his friend goes missing under mysterious circumstances, Darwin is forced to get back in the game to save his buddy. It was a fun novel to write, and it was made even better because I was able to license from Bruce Springsteen the first 5 lines of his song Better Days as an epigram for the book. And Bruce only charged me $250, which I thought was a really good deal. After Better Days, I wrote Everyone Dies Famous, and I returned to Dancer Stonemason. But this novel takes place 30 years after the close of American Pastime, and everything happens on a single day in July 2003. Dancer is now an old man grieving the death of his son. Everyone Dies Famous is a story from the heartland about the uncommon lives of everyday people, the choices they make, how they live, and how they die. As you can see, it won a lot of awards. They're not major awards, admittedly, but I cherish them. It's hard to get noticed with so many books being published, and this recognition is greatly appreciated. I finished Everyone Dies Famous in 2019 and began working on my latest novel, Dry Heat. Now, Dry Heat takes place in Phoenix and begins in 1999. Now, one of the events that profoundly affected me while I was running that business in Phoenix, I didn't share with you earlier. It took place on a hot summer night in 1999. The son of one of my employees was riding in a car with 2 other boys, and they were involved in a road rage incident with another vehicle. One of the boys fired a gun at the other car. It turned out the other driver, who had instigated the incident, the confrontation, was an off-duty cop. They were all arrested, but the other 2 boys disappeared before the trial. My friend's son was the only one prosecuted. He was facing 20 years in prison if he lost at trial, so he took a plea for 3 years. One foolish mistake and his life was changed forever. I will never forget the day when his mother returned to work after they had been accepted that plea and the son was taken off to jail. It's such an agonizing decision to have to make. That incident was the inspiration for my latest novel, Dry Heat. I'm going to read you a chapter from that. I have to give you a trigger warning. It's written from the perspective of a teenage boy, and it's not politically correct. Part 1, Joey. Chapter 1, 3 p.m. Saturday, November 20th, 1999, Roadrunner Park, Phoenix, Arizona. The gangs were always stealing the nylon basketball nets, so the park director had replaced them with galvanized steel chain, which rattled obnoxiously on every bad shot. Joey frowned as his jump shot clanked off the front rim. "Your shot sucks today, Joey Blade," Mallory said as she bounced the ball back to him. "Your boobs are distracting me. Maybe it's time you started wearing a bra." Blonde with a pixie cut that framed her cute little girl face, Mallory could have passed for a 12-year-old if it hadn't been for her huge breasts. She was 15, 2 years younger than Joey, and they had been playground buddies for 10 years. She lived with her creepy father in a rundown brick house in a block away, and escaped to the park most afternoons. "Come on, concentrate, Mr. All-American." She lifted up her sweatshirt, flashing him as he took his next shot, an air ball. Joey chased after the errant shot, hit checking Mallory as he grabbed the ball. He dribbled out to the corner and swished a turnaround jumper. Yes, no distractions that time. He pumped his fist. Mallory smirked. Better get used to it. You'll have plenty of distractions when you're in La La Land next week. La La Land. Joey was out of time. He had to make a decision about his trip to USC, and he had to make it now. He clanked another free throw off the rim. What's wrong, Joey? Dutch. Mallory scowled as she bounced the ball back to him. She knew what Joey's dad was like. Dutch Blade was an unfiltered, hard on his sleeve guy. He could chew someone out one moment and be hugging them the next. He doesn't want you following in the immortal footsteps of OJ? Joey gave her a look. Mallory was always a smartass. 3 weeks ago, in his last high school football game, the Shadow Mountain Matadors had defeated Apache Junction, last year's state champion, 28-24. Joey rushed for 264 yards and scored all 4 touchdowns for Shadow Mountain. After the game, he was contacted by every school in the Pac-10, all promising that he would have a bright future playing football for their university. He thought it would be cool to have all that attention, but it was really like trying to date 5 girls at once. Everyone insisted their school was the best choice for Joey. He didn't like disappointing people, and he didn't want to string anyone along. So he quickly narrowed the search to USC in Los Angeles and the University of Arizona in Tucson. He dribbled out to the foul line and took another turnaround jumper. The shot was a foot short and wide left. Mallory scampered over and picked it up. Can't blame that one on me. Joey tried spinning the ball on his index finger, but he couldn't keep his focus. Dutch grew up in Tucson. He loves the Wildcats. He's always said that if his folks had had the money, he would have gone to U of A instead of Vietnam. He glided out to the corner again. Ball, he shouted. Mallory fired a chest-high pass to him, and he swished a 15-footer. Maybe he just wants to keep you close so you can help with the family business, Mallory said with a faux expression of innocence. Dutch had started Blade Engine and Crankshaft when he returned from Vietnam. With the help of Joey's mom, Callie, it had become the largest engine rebuilder in the Southwest. My dad thinks anyone who goes to California just wants to be a movie star. Mallory tilted her head and squinted at him. You're pretty cute with that curly hair and those girly eyelashes. I could definitely see you in the movies. Shut up, Mallory. This is serious. What do you want to be when you grow up? A football player? Or are you planning to take over the business? Joey gave her the finger. They had that discussion before. I want to be a writer. USC would be better for that, but my dad, a writer, is even worse than a movie star. He doesn't think it's a real job unless you're sweating. So your big problem is deciding between a free education in California or Arizona. Mallory arched her eyebrows, suggesting that was the kind of problem most people would love to have. Then she grinned and said, you want to come over to my place for a glass of iced tea? Joey stared down at his feet. Mallory was cool, but he couldn't stand her father. Donnie Stewart worked at Blade Engine as a mechanic doing engine installs. He thought he was some kind of comedian. He was always telling stupid, dirty jokes, and his delivery sucked. He acted like Joey was disrespecting him for not laughing his ass off. Joey knew Stewart resented him because he was the boss's kid. Donnie Stewart was an all-around creepy guy. My dad's running the install center today, Mallory said. He won't be home for 2 hours. Iced tea sounds great, Joey said. Joey sat down on the yoga mat on Mallory's screened porch. She brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and handed one to him. This is my workout studio, she said. You okay with the floor? I can get you a chair. No, this is good. He took a gulp. Thanks, I really sucked today. You were definitely not Joey Blade All-American. Joey shook his head. It's Salita's fault. She came home today from ASU with her latest boyfriend. I'm pretty sure he's gay. We all sit down for a special family lunch, and she tells me how cool it is that I'm visiting USC next weekend. She wasn't supposed to blab that because I haven't told Dutch yet. She did it just to get a rise out of him. She's been fighting with him all her life. Salita's cool. I wish I had a sister who could tell my old man to go to hell. Joey shifted his position, trying to get comfortable. I love Salita, but she makes it so difficult. When Dutch heard about USC, he blew a gasket, told Salita that no kid of his is attending some granola munching fag school. I thought her boyfriend was going to faint. So then mom got angry and told Dutch to watch his language. Callie Blade's the only person on earth who can stop Dutch in his tracks. He got all contrite and told the boyfriend that there was nothing wrong with granola. Mallory laughed so hard she snorted tea through her nose. Your family meals sound like so much fun. After dinner, Dutch drags me into his office and starts giving me the hard sell, telling me all the reasons I should go to U of A. Closer to home, he says. Joey shuddered. That's not a good reason. He tries to tell me it has a better football program, but he knows that's not even close to true. So then he tries the career angle, tells me I'll make a better connection, but that's only if my career is working for Blade Engine, and that's never going to happen. So then, get this, he says the weather's better. The weather. Can you believe that? Joey took another gulp of iced tea. I say, the weather, Dad, come on. And he says, it's a dry heat, very comfortable. Mallory laughed again. Dry heat, your dad's a trip. Even tries reason, says the Wildcats need me, says I'll get lost in the shuffle because USC drafts 10 tailbacks a year. But the USC recruiter compared me to Marcus Allen, probably because we're both 6'2" and neither of us are speedsters, not like OJ. Ha, they never talk about OJ. That's what happens when you mess up as badly as he did. Anyway, Dutch wants me to go down to Tucson for a meet and greet next Saturday, and I want to go to that USC game. Joey paused to catch his breath. Mallory giggled. What's so funny? Joey asked. She set her iced tea on the floor and cupped his face in her hands. You talk too much. Then she tongue kissed him. Joey's heart raced. He had ignored most of the stories, but he knew Mallory had a reputation. He slipped his hands under her t-shirt as she tugged down his shorts. He unsnapped her shorts and she wiggled out of them. They lay together on the mat, their naked bodies pressed together. It was really going to happen. Joey tried not to show how nervous he was. He rolled on top. He wasn't sure how to proceed, but Mallory helped him. Joey came in 10 seconds. Sorry, he said, embarrassed. Mallory was cool. That's okay. Have another iced tea and I'll bet you'll be ready for another round. He was, and it was much better the second time. Afterward, they spooned on the yoga mat. Joey cupped her breasts and tried to think of something to say, but he'd already talked too much and he couldn't think of anything that wasn't lame, so he kept his mouth shut. Mallory scrunched around and rolled on top of him, pinning him to the mat. You don't have to say anything, Joey. That was nice. Nice, Joey said. He was hoping for more than nice. Nice is good. As he was heading out the door, Mallory wrapped her arms around him again. I think your father is right. About what? Arizona, that's where you should go. Why? Because then we could do this again, have more nice times. She giggled, and Joey had to admit it sounded appealing. And that concludes my formal presentation, but I wanted to let you know I have books available. Really appreciate this opportunity for inviting me, and you can find any of my books on my website at lenjoybooks.com. I also brought paperbacks for the people who are here. I'm selling them at a special seniors discount of $10 a book. Thank you very much.
Why don't we take questions from the audience first? Any questions here? I'm gonna get up. All right. No questions? Going once, going twice?
Yeah, the part of the novel you're talking about where there's a setting of an engine recycling plant or something, is that
Yes.
sort of autobiographical?
Well, it's an experience I was aware of, so I wanted to take advantage. I actually put the fictional plant in the same place as our plant had been located, yes. But the rest of the story is all completely made up, other than it was inspired by that incident of a boy being, sent to prison for a foolish mistake.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Say, Ron, you there?
Yes,
Ron?
Rick, I am.
Okay, take it away.
All right. While we're waiting for others, I had a couple, 3 questions that I had, and I'll start with those. Len, when you are preparing, or maybe you've already prepared a draft, who do you go to for constructive criticism? And after listening to people you might go to, do you change your novel in any important way? What about that process of criticism?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's I do sort of two stages. As I'm writing, I will share chunks of after I've maybe written 100 pages or something. I have two or three readers who I will send material to. One of them is my former attorney, Jim Clark, and another is one of the writers I met on Zoetrope. And they're very patient with me and willing to read stuff. And I trust them because they're honest and they'll tell me things that are working and not working. It's easy to find, to get lost and think you've explained something well, and where by having someone else read it that doesn't know anything about the story, it gives you a chance to see where you've got blind spots. And then after I've gone through the process and got what I think is a good draft, I'm convinced it's a great story. I always hire, before I consider a publisher or anybody else, an editor, a professional editor, to read the whole thing, not for line editing, but just to get a sense of what is their reaction? Does the story have holes in it? Do you like the story? What's the problem with it? And in this case, it was interesting that writer I mentioned, Sands Hall, I contacted her because she had edited some stuff for me before, and she was not available, but she recommended her brother-in-law, Louis Jones, who's a novelist and instructor, and he read the novel and gave me some excellent, feedback on places where I could tighten up the structure, but also encouraged me that it was it was on the right track. So yeah, it's like I can usually I got the draft done in probably less than a year, but it was probably another 6 months of editing and things before I submitted it to my publisher.
Okay, thank you for that. Another one that comes to my mind, as you're writing, do your characters change in any important ways you didn't anticipate? I mean, you started out with some idea, I'm sure, but as you're writing, do they take on a life of their own, and do you kind of work off of how they've become? How do characters change, or do they pretty much stay as how you thought they would throughout the whole?
No, because I don't really know what they're like when I start. I mean, I have some ideas vaguely, but I had a notion. I just had this notion about Joey and this girlfriend who gets pregnant, and I didn't really have a sense of who she was until I started writing scenes with her, and then she became my favorite character because she has a lot of spirit, and she just developed a lot different probably than I would have I expected. But it's sort of like you put people in scenes and you basically play acting, and they have these conversations and things come up, they say something maybe I wasn't expecting, that, and then it changes how I see them. So yes, I don't have a some characters like Dutch Blade is modeled after somebody I knew, and he's pretty well developed in my mind, but a lot of other characters that they're not.
Okay. Something you said creates another thought in mind. You say scenes. Have you pictured this in a way that might even turn into a movie script, and how might that happen?
Yes, I don't know how it's going to happen. I think about it all the time, because that's sort of the way I write is cinematically. I mean, I don't have a lot of rumination and off camera stuff where guys are just thinking about pensively. Most of my story is told through action and through the settings, and like I was trying to find interesting activities for the like work activities, not just something where there's somebody staring at a computer screen. And I've tried to, I've talked with a couple of people about how would you at least get someone interested in considering this as like an indie film project. And I just started that contact, but it's apparently not an original idea. Most authors still are convinced that their books will make great movies. So it's not, I haven't had anybody that's taken me up on that, but I am, anybody out there that is interested, I would love to work with a filmmaker, like someone who, could convert this to a screenplay and then go from there. But yeah, I don't know how it actually works.
Tom is asking a question. What do you think of these book awards that make instant bestsellers? Tom's thought.
Well, I'd love to get one. I mean, there's a lot of awards out there. Like I was, pleased with Everyone Dies Famous as they're small awards, but I got an award for Southern fiction, Midwest fiction, aging fiction. So I felt like it was pretty diverse. But it's hard, like now, with Amazon has a lot of genres, or, like they slice it into different groups. So it is possible, like with American Pastime, that book made it to number 2 on their list of baseball stories about baseball, baseball writing stories. Ball 4 remained perpetually a number 1 and never got unseated. I think now it's back down to about 50th, but yeah, awards can help a lot. And, Oprah or any of those famous people, if they recognize your book, that makes a huge difference.
I assume we could find your books in off of your website. Would that be one good way to visit the website, and anybody interested, or Amazon, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, and my website will give you all the books and reviews and stuff. So I encourage that. And I have a newsletter, which you can click, you'll see it on there in the contact page. If you click on that, then I'll add you to my newsletter and harass you all the time about new novels coming out. So I try to keep adding to that, because it's really helpful in getting the word out on the books. But Amazon is the king for us indie writers to get recognized. So I always hope that, if you haven't bought the book directly from a bookstore, to buy it from Amazon and to post a review on Amazon, because that's how we move up when you look at Amazon and search for books, if you're in the top 50 or something, it's a lot easier to be recognized and identified.
Last question wait, here is another person. Mark Lukovich is asking, what is your writing regimen? How do you proceed to write? What do you do?
Well, I usually work out every morning and walk my dog, and I get up early. And so usually by 10 a.m. I've finished workouts and taken care of Russell. And then I try to write from 10 to 2, but I have a very generous notion of what I consider writing. A lot of times it's reading other people's work. Like, as an independent author, I particularly support the writers who have been published by my publisher, and others who have just come out with their novels. So I read and review their novels as well. But it's generally I don't do a lot of work after 2 or 3 o'clock. That what I would consider actually writing. But I think it's a good day if I get 500 to 1,000 words written or revised. That's good progress for me, and I've been able to keep up that pace. Almost all the time. I think, I guess I always add to this, like, I do triathlons, and it's a lot of training, and it's a discipline. And I think that a lot of the same disciplines are required for getting ready for a race are the same that you need for, writing a novel. It's like a day, you have to do it every day. It's not you don't just show up at the time the race is ready.
I have one last one that I'll ask, and then I'll turn it back to Fred. Are you at the dream stage of something that's going to be the great American novel, your next project that you're thinking about?
Oh, I've already written 3 of them already. I have another novel I'm working on right now. I'm about a third through with it. I don't have any problem coming up with ideas and writing. It's like still need to be discovered by move out of the minor leagues into the majors, but it's fun to keep working at it.
I thank you on behalf of those of us on Zoom, Len, and I'm turning it back to Fred.
Thank you.
Thank you.